Welcome. We're back in Brussels giving you our monthly update. Actually, you'll get two this month, so you'll be really spoiled because we'll be back in 2 weeks' time. Since I last spoke to you, I've been in Jordan dealing with the issue of refugees. It's a very topical issue back home. It's been talked about all over Europe. I visited one of the camps in Jordan. Jordan has 1.4 million refugees, and then the camps at Satari that I visited had 80,000 refugees. And the stories that I heard from some of those who had horrific, barbaric experiences in Syria, which I wouldn't even repeat here, it would be too disturbing. But what really was more disturbing is the fact that they had escaped, fled from those awful situations that they found themselves in, only to end up in a rat-infested camp that hadn't enough food, enough water, and the conditions upon which these people were living in were ones that would shock us all. And think about 1.4 million people, and only 15% of the people that are refugees are living in camps. The vast majority of them are out in the cities and urban areas. Today we're also going to be protesting in the Parliament in relation to Palestine. I'm sure that many of you are watching the trend and pattern that's taking place over there with horror, thinking that what we are now perhaps going into is another onslaught, not just in Gaza, but also in the West Bank. So the whole situation in Jerusalem, where Jerusalem has been shut down and the Palestinians are not getting access to the mosques and the sites for them to pray. So there's obviously a lot of tension, so we as GUI NGL are going to be protesting and stating our case that Palestine should be placed under international protection. Yesterday we voted on psychoactive substance legal highs, and they prefer the name for them is psychoactive substance because they shouldn't be legal, and we got 4 of them banned. These substances have killed hundreds of particularly young people across Europe, and many of them in Ireland. So, and some of the substances are so potent that they're more potent than cocaine and heroin. So we were glad that finally this Parliament had taken the decision to ban 4 of the substances, but I am the rapporteur for a number of other substances, and that is something that I am going to be putting a bit of attention and focus on, because many of them are being manufactured in China, and we need to look at the source and then the implications of that for us. There's much more that I could talk about, but time does not allow me to go into it in more detail, so I'm going to pass you over to Lynn, and she's going to give you her update.
Thanks, Martina. Well, I suppose since I last spoke to you, this was the success of getting the Boylan Right to Water report passed through the Parliament, and despite Fine Gael's group doing everything within their powers to stop the vote taking place and to try and water down the most progressive elements, the report did pass, and it was a real success for the Right to Water campaign across Europe. So it included elements that criticised the Troika for their pursuit of privatisation and water charges in Ireland. It also said that water is not a commodity. It called for water to be enshrined as a human right, and it excluded water from TTIP. So there were a huge amount of really positive elements in that report. I also went to visit Ibrahim Halawa, who you'll be familiar with. He's now the young Irish teenager who's running into his 3rd year in detention in the prison in Cairo. I visited him in August. We're very concerned about both his mental and physical health, and only there on Sunday his trial was postponed for the 9th time. So we're now calling on Enda Kenny to not only call for the presidential decree for Ibrahim, which he does qualify for despite what the government are saying, but also if they're really serious about Ibrahim Halawa, then why have they left the post of ambassador vacant since April? It doesn't show that they're taking the matter serious at all. So we're going to continue to push on the government to stand up and demand that this young teenager be returned home to Ireland, to his family and to his studies and his degree that's waiting for him to start in Trinity. So I'll leave it there and I'll pass you over to Liadh.
Gurmagas Lynn Boylan, well, Dave Vermaas, a hard gael, Kadim Agron, Special Show Strasbourg. A couple of things happening, I suppose. What's really topical is the European Court of Justice decision yesterday to state that the Safe Harbour Agreement, which is to do with personal data protection, is in fact illegal. That is going to have consequences for TTIP in terms of the negotiations, because obviously people's personal data cannot be used as a commodity, and that's now illegal. So for the Commission to sign up to TTIP would be illegal if they don't thrash out what is going to happen with that. Chomala Shin, of course, I'm going to be constantly reminding you of the fishing conference that we're having in Dungarvan on the 23rd and 24th. It's open to the public on the Saturday, so tá fáilte over fad tachtan. I hope that we can talk about uniting the fishermen and talk about the criminalisation of fishermen and sustainable fishing, as well as diversification, which is really important for our coastal communities. So fáilte roibh tacht sin, I will be reminding you again in 2 weeks' time. Also, Shibsha Hossa Valley might not be aware of this because it generally doesn't make the main news. This government had an underspend of 8 million in terms of the Gaeltacht regions, and so they had to send it back, which is an absolute disgrace considering na constantly moorhagging sa Gaeltacht 8 million céimiid post na crochóch sé sin sna Gaeltachtaí. So you should really start tweeting and start putting that message out there. They're sending 2 million back and they're going to reinstate the remaining millions, and I'm sure they'll put a spin on it that this is additional funding. It is not. It was an underspend of 8 million. It just goes to show you how much that this government doesn't draw down in terms of funding and how they don't implement it. Níl sé seo sásul ar chorbe a chorde. So biggie kind my other Gurmagad. Matt.
Liadh, one of the things that has been taken up quite a bit of my own office's time has been the Payment Services Directive, which is going to be voted on in plenary this week. It's a very technical file, but it's about opening up banking services to ordinary citizens in a more open and transparent way, and I'd urge people who might have an interest in that to look into the details of the file. One of the significant things that's happening in Europe this week, and one of the things that you probably won't hear an awful lot about despite the fact that a huge milestone has been crossed, is that this very morning as we sit here, 3 million signatories that have been collected from across the European Union are going to be handed into the European Commission. These are people who went to the effort of putting their name to a petition calling on the Commission to abandon both the TTIP and the CETA trade agreements, particularly those trade agreements that include the infamous at this stage ISDS mechanism. That's the mechanism that would allow, should these trade agreements cross the line, corporations to sue, for example, the Irish government for implementing decisions that are aimed at protecting the best interests of the Irish people. Has huge consequences, and unfortunately, despite the fact that hundreds of thousands of people have been engaging in campaign, and as I say, 3 million people have come together and signed a citizens' initiative petition. Unfortunately, it hasn't reached the level of public consciousness that it could. I hope that today's development in terms of that huge milestone, the number needed in order to secure a citizens' initiative is 1 million. They have reached that threefold, and unfortunately many governments, including the Irish government and the European Commission, are intent on ignoring that. But I think the message that's been brought to Brussels this morning is that they ignore the will of the people at their peril, and certainly from Sinn Féin's point of view, our work in relation to fighting and standing up against bad trade deals that put corporate interests against the interests or ahead of the interests of ordinary citizens across Europe will not be tolerated, and we're going to continue to campaign against TTIP and against any trade agreement that includes an ISDS mechanism that puts citizens' interests second.
Can I ask you all to text 770 and put truck 15, and after that put either £3, £5 or £10. And that's the text number that Sinn Féin, for instance, mayors across the north and elsewhere are getting behind Trócaire to try and collect from the refugees. So that's 700 700 70, truck 15, and put £3, £5, £10, whatever you can afford. All of that is much needed revenue and money that is needed to try and help the refugees. Slán foil.